Welcome on into the Wolverine Recruiting Show. Clayton Safey here with EJ Holland. A busy week for Michigan football recruiting last week with the bye, so we will talk a little bit about that. We will also talk about the Wolverines and what they're going to do at defensive back going forward, and I guess that's where we're going to start. EJ, what is next for defensive back recruiting? Michigan kind of – there's been names that have kind of come up on the board, I feel like, throughout the last really 6 months or so since this cycle has begun to ramp up, come off the board, on and off, things like that. Damani Jackson is obviously the headliner, in terms of targets there, the USC commit, 5-star, but there are obviously other names that Michigan is honing in on.
Yeah, so right now Michigan has 5 commits. And they have 2 corners with Will Johnson, Miles Pollard. They have a corner nickel in Cody Jones. They have a safety nickel in Damani Dent. So they still have some flexibility, even though that seems like a large group. They've always wanted 5 or 6 in the secondary, and that's still the plan. So starting off with Damani Jackson, look, Damani's always going to have his spot no matter what. He is that elite guy. He can play multiple spots. He can be a true safety. He can play the Dax Hill role. He can be a corner. I mean, there's a lot to love about Damani Jackson. Obviously, that's why he's a 5-star, and Michigan's still in a strong position to flip him from USC. But that one's not going to be really decided until December, maybe even January. So there are a couple other guys that Michigan is monitoring. One guy they are making a top overall target is Zeke Berry. And he would be an athlete take as opposed to, one of a safety or a corner or a nickel take. He's kind of best available. They like him that much. So he's only a 3-star. But I went out and saw him a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, and he really impressed me. I can see why the staff really loves him. So I think they value him much higher than his rating. He recently decommitted from Arizona. Right now, I think Oregon and Michigan are at the top of his list, with Oregon having an edge, but Michigan working hard to bring him in for an official visit. So Zeke Berry would be next in line after Damani Jackson. And then there are a few guys that they're monitoring. TJ Hall is currently committed to Washington. He's a safety out of the Fresno area. And so they really like what he brings to the table. They are still really pushing for they're still really pushing for Austin Osbury, who's a Rivals 100 defensive back out of Louisiana. He's also a top of the board guy along with Zeke Berry, but a little more of a long shot still. Ron Bellamy went out and saw him during the bye week. He obviously has Louisiana ties. Being a Louisiana native, so he's been able to relate with him. He was on campus for the game against Washington. So those are some guys to really know in the secondary, but I would expect 1 or 2 more takes before the end of the cycle.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And, as people heard there, I think EJ may have got a trade request in fantasy or something like that. So we'll also keep an eye on any transactions that he's making in his big money league. I hear you're in quite the league there, but let's get to our next topic, which is Michigan kind of going out of its traditional, sense of recruiting and offering a junior college player, Jeffrey Mba. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Independence Community College, a kid who's a freshman, 6'5", 305 pounds over there, but is actually a little older, junior age. He's from the Congo, then from France, and had some paperwork issues getting over to the United States when he was originally a recruit in the class of 2019. So here he is now, looking to level up from, Independence Community College, Last Chance U, for one of those seasons there, to, kind of more big-time college football. Michigan recruited him back then and now is pursuing him again, throwing out an offer.
Yeah, so Michigan did, like you said, recruit Mba out of that 2019 class when he was originally supposed to enroll out of school. I wasn't here for that. I wasn't on the beat yet. I came a little later, but he is a guy they're very, very familiar with. Biff Poggi, who was the associate head coach at Michigan, has really strong connections in this recruitment. In fact, Mba was going to enroll at St. Francis before those paperwork issues came about. But this, Michigan doesn't really offer JUCO kids, but this isn't a traditional JUCO kid. He's more of an international kid that simply had some paperwork issues. Independence is a really strong JUCO, like you mentioned. They were on the Netflix series Last Chance U and everything. So he's doing really, really well there. He's older. While he's still raw, he is the guy that can come in and provide some immediate depth as a JUCO kid. And so with Michigan fighting for Deion Walker right now, I think it makes sense to offer and take a depth piece like Mba. So it's a really unique situation. I know there was a lot of people saying, well, Michigan doesn't offer JUCO kids. It's more so because he is a non-traditional JUCO kid, but he can still fill the role of a JUCO kid in the sense of adding immediate depth.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. And then there's always going to be, and it's like half joking from the fan base, and even I've participated in it too. It's like, how is this kid going to get past admissions? That's another thing with JUCO. It's another thing with transfers in general at a place like Michigan, because you hear about it with even non-athletes. They'll transfer from pretty good schools, and they lose a lot of their credits, just because of Michigan's high academic standards. Well, one thing that Michigan has been able to do in both football and basketball over the last several years has been get graduate guys, because they've already graduated. They're not going to lose those credits. Now they can do some grad school as long as they get in. Or younger guys, like a freshman, that doesn't have a ton of credits that he would lose and can still, kind of progress at his natural, year by year, class by class type of thing as a student. So that's another thing too, to be a little less worried about in terms of admissions and, credits, because sometimes these guys get scared off because they're trying to transfer in and a junior turns into a freshman because of that whole deal. But what do you think, gut feel, I guess, early on, you throw out the offer. He's being pursued by some other schools as well, some pretty good schools. But Michigan's got that connection there with Biff Poggi. They recruited him, a few years ago, so have that connection there. Jim Harbaugh, obviously involved there. Kind of what's your gut on this? Is Michigan throwing out an offer almost as good, or as good as putting them right in the mix?
Yeah, I think Michigan's definitely in the mix right away. I'm looking forward to catching up with Jeffrey, but I think there's a sense around Michigan that this is a guy they can definitely get on board.
There you have it. Last thing that we'll get to, our travels on the road, which coincided a little bit with Michigan staff and where they were on the bye week. So we'll get to some of that. I was at Detroit King versus Detroit Cass Tech, the Public School League championship game, a rematch between those two teams, which came down to the wire and was an exciting game in the second half. We'll get to that in a second. Jim Harbaugh and Matt Weiss were on hand to see Dante Moore play against Deion Walker, a guy you talked about with the defensive tackles there. Dante Moore, 2023 quarterback. But EJ, tell us a little bit about your week and weekend last week and who you were able to see.
Yeah, so I went out to see Jimmy Rolder at practice. He's a four-star linebacker out of Chicago Maris, the hottest recruit in the country right now. Just picked up, over the last week, has picked up offers from Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, Ohio State, TCU, Purdue. Just a lot of schools showing interest in him. He's kind of one of those late risers. Mike McDonald was out to see him on Friday night, so a day after I saw Rolder. Right now, everything's still kind of new in his recruitment. He's still trying to process everything, but he does have high interest in Michigan. Michigan was the second Power 5 school to offer him, so they were on him a little early. Jim Harbaugh was the one that personally extended the offer. He's a former Illinois baseball commit. He's a big athletic kid, and so he's quickly becoming a priority at linebacker. On Friday, I went out and saw a top 2023 defensive back target, Jair Hill. He's phenomenal. He is a top tier 1 target for Michigan next cycle out of Kanaki, Illinois. He is a guy that can play corner, can play safety, returned a punt 80 yards for a touchdown when I watched him live, just a dynamic athlete. And then on Friday night, I saw Kenneth Grant, Michigan's defensive tackle commit, one of the most underrated guys in the country. Grant had an easy day at the office, didn't really have to do a whole lot. He had a sack, a tackle for loss, got some quarterback pressures, only played about a half as his team prepares for a playoff run. And it was a blowout win, so running clock in the second half. So again, easy day at the office for Kenneth Grant. So those were the guys I got to see during my time on the road.
I was looking at this picture before we came on here, getting everything ready for the video. I mean, he is just so well put together. We've talked about him because he recently committed and obviously breaking his game down. But do you get that sense that he could just physically play right away if he needed to?
Yeah, definitely. I think they're bringing him in with the expectations that he can play early. He fits the scheme perfectly. He's 6'5", 340 pounds, but doesn't look sloppy at all. So I think Ken's going to be, one of the biggest steals of the class.
Definitely. And then as I alluded to Friday night, I was in the rain for the first half. King versus Cass Tech. It let up a little bit in the second half, and that's when kind of the fireworks started, with Jim Harbaugh and quarterbacks coach Matt Weiss on hand. So, King is down 15-0, and, that's at the half. And then Dante Moore, who was making some plays early on in the game, just wasn't getting a ton of help from his teammates, starts to make a few more plays, throws 2 second-half touchdowns. His receivers started to actually catch the ball. There were a few crucial drops in the first half. They tie the game up at 15-15. Really started to put the pressure on Cass Tech, get a pick 6 to go ahead, and then they got another pick in the end zone to seal the deal. Dante Moore able to kneel out the clock for his team's second win over crosstown rival Cass Tech on the season. They seal the deal for the championship as well, the Public School League championship. Dante was impressive. I hadn't seen him in game action before. EJ, you've seen him quite a bit, but I was able to see him in 7-on-7, and to kind of see the stuff that he does in 7-on-7, how impressive he is, translate to the actual game field, I thought was pretty impressive. The fact that he's poised back there, he moves around well, and even in the rain, he was managing the game super well. He did throw his first interception of the season. Their offensive line, I don't want to be too critical, but was a sieve at times during this game and pretty inconsistent, especially early before they tightened up. And he was getting pressured quite a bit early on in that game. Had to kind of force a ball off his back foot. He said he wanted it back, but kind of knew he wasn't going to go a whole season without throwing a pick. When we talked to him after the game. As for Deion Walker on the other side, the first takeaway is that he's just so big, and he feels like he's getting bigger every time we see him, even though he's slimmed down a little bit. But I think it's more so that he's getting more put together. As we talk about Kenneth Grant, Deion Walker was a guy who was a little bit sloppy maybe a year ago, and he admitted all that. Now he's not that at all. He played both ways. He looked a little bit tired at times, which was understandable given the fact that he was playing both ways in a physical, tough game, that was tight. So conditioning obviously is still big there. And at the next level, he's not going to play both ways, but, was just super impactful in the middle on defense, which is where he's going to play if he goes to Michigan. Able to just kind of get through at will. As I mentioned, when you talk about Dante Moore having guys, with hands in his face, you're talking about Deion Walker and some of those other guys, that lead the way there for Cass Tech. So, those are my takeaways. Jim Harbaugh and Matt Weiss were watching both guys closely. They were going back and forth from sideline to sideline to kind of show their support for each team. But there was a little bit of cheering when Dante made some plays when they were on the King sideline. Harbaugh was getting a little bit fired up, super into the game. There were some calls he wasn't sure about exactly what they were. He was like walking over to the King sideline trying to get some clarification. So they were super engaged. And Matt Weiss and Jim Harbaugh were also taking some videos of some plays, kind of like how I was doing. I guess they were kind of learning what it was like to be a journalist out here trying to get some clips. But, I just thought it was interesting how closely they're watching. And Matt Weiss, as we've talked about before, is, super good football mind and super smart. He's watching every little detail of the game on the sideline there. But those are basically the takeaways from this weekend in that game. So King pulling out a 21-15 win. EJ, anything else here before we wrap up?
I'm glad you finally got a chance to see Dante, even though it was a rainy game. And, I think King has a true chance to win state this year. So I think we'll get a chance to see him later in the year. Yeah,
they do. He is he's kind of like, I was thinking in that first half, he's kind of a one-man wrecking crew, but the rest of his team picked it up, able to pull out a win. And it did not look like it was trending that way early on. But I think they I'll give them credit for kind of keeping that belief. I was on their sideline most of the time. And when I was on the Cass Tech sideline, there was not as much energy, even when they were up 15 points, as there was on the Kings sideline. So that's a credit to the leaders on that team, including Dante Moore, for everything he did. Then, leading him back with 2 touchdowns in the second half. But that is our show for this week. We will catch everybody next time. Make sure to head to thewolverine.com for full Michigan football recruiting coverage. Subscribe to this video. Hit the like button. We appreciate all that, and we'll see everybody next time.